You walk into your first therapy session, sit down on that surprisingly comfortable chair, and suddenly you feel it. That creeping awareness. The psychologist across from you is looking at you, not in a weird way, but in that attentive, slightly tilted head kind of way, and your brain immediately starts spiraling. Oh God, they can tell I'm anxious. They probably know I'm lying about how much I exercise. Wait, can they see that I'm thinking about whether they can read my mind right now? Or ever been mid-conversation, maybe telling a story or laughing a little too loudly, and suddenly you feel it, that weird pause. Someone looks at you and says, half joking, half serious, "You're a psychology person, right?" And before you can answer, they add, "So, what am I thinking right now?" Or maybe you're the one who's thought it. You sit across from a therapist or a friend who studies psychology, and your brain starts whispering, "They know. They can see through me. I should sit straighter, say less, smile more. Don't reveal too much." Why does that idea stick so hard? Why do so many people genuinely believe psychologists can read minds? Let me show you something interesting. That belief isn't silly. It's not dumb. And it's not about psychologists at all. It's about how your brain tries to stay safe. Think about the first time you realized other people have inner worlds just as complex as yours. As a kid, that moment is kind of shocking. You realize your thoughts aren't floating around in the open. They're private, hidden, yours. And once you learn that, another thought quietly follows you into adulthood. What if someone could see past that wall? Psychologists often get treated like emotional X-ray machines. People lower their voice around them, they joke nervously, they add disclaimers like "don't analyze me," while clearly hoping they won't be analyzed. But here's the twist. The fear isn't that psychologists know everything. It's that you suspect deep down that you're more readable than you'd like to believe. Your brain is a pattern-making machine. That's its whole job. It scans faces, tone of voice, posture, pauses, micro-expressions. Long before psychology was a formal field, humans had to do this to survive. Is that person angry, safe, lying, interested, dangerous? Our ancestors didn't need mind reading. They needed pattern detection, and they got very good at it. So when you hear psychologist, your brain doesn't imagine textbooks or research papers. It imagines someone who sees patterns faster than you can hide them. It feels like mind reading, but it's really something closer to weather prediction. You don't need to see the future to know a storm is coming. Dark clouds, heavy air, a certain smell. Psychologists are trained to notice the emotional weather. And when someone notices what you're used to keeping invisible, it can feel deeply unsettling. There's also something else going on here, a kind of emotional projection. When you think psychologists can read minds, you're often projecting your own self-awareness outward. You know your contradictions. You know the thoughts you don't say out loud. You know when you're pretending. And part of you assumes that if you can feel all of that inside, someone trained must be able to see it from the outside. It's like being in a glass house, but forgetting the glass is one way. Here's a relatable example. You walk into a room feeling anxious, but you're smiling. Later, someone says, "Hey, you seemed a little off today." Suddenly, your heart drops. How did they know? You didn't say anything, but anxiety leaks. It always does, through tension in the shoulders, through rushed speech, through shallow breathing. When someone names it, it feels like exposure. Now, multiply that feeling by the idea of years of training, and your brain fills in the gaps with magic. Another layer to this belief comes from how we mythologize expertise. We tend to exaggerate what specialists can do. Doctors become miracle workers. Chefs become taste wizards. Psychologists become mind readers. It's comforting, in a way. It suggests someone out there understands the chaos inside you, even if you don't. There's a quiet hope buried inside the fear, because for every "don't read my mind," there's also a "please understand me." That contradiction is important. Many people who fear being psychologically analyzed are also craving to be seen, really seen, not just the polite version, not just the highlight reel, the messy thoughts, the contradictions, the feelings that don't make sense yet. The idea that someone might see all of that without you having to explain it is both terrifying and deeply appealing. That's not paranoia, that's human. Culture plays a role too. Movies and TV love the genius therapist trope. One look, one sentence, and suddenly your entire childhood trauma is exposed. In reality, psychology is slower, humbler, and far more uncertain. But stories teach us that insight equals power. And power, when turned toward our inner world, feels invasive. So your brain does what it always does around perceived power. It gets defensive. You start monitoring yourself, editing your words, performing a safer version of yourself. Ironically, this self-monitoring often makes you more readable, not less. Stiffness, over-explaining, nervous laughter, these are loud signals. Silence can be louder than speech. There's also the illusion of transparency at play. Psychologists talk about this cognitive bias where we overestimate how much our internal states are visible to others. You feel awkward, so you assume you look awkward. You feel guilty, so you assume everyone can tell. The truth is, most people are far more absorbed in their own inner noise than in decoding yours. But when you believe someone can read minds, that illusion intensifies. Every blink feels like a tell. Every pause feels like a confession. Let me say this clearly, because it matters. Psychologists cannot read minds. They don't know what you're thinking unless you tell them. What they do know is how humans tend to think under certain conditions. They recognize patterns the way a musician recognizes chords or a mechanic hears engine trouble. That's not magic. That's familiarity. And here's the philosophical part that sneaks up on you if you sit with this long enough. The fear of being mind-read is really the fear of being known without consent, of being understood before you're ready, of someone arriving at the truth faster than your defenses can negotiate the terms. We build our identities carefully. We curate them. We decide what version of ourselves each person gets. When psychology threatens that control, even symbolically, it can feel like a loss of autonomy. But there's another way to see it. What if being read isn't about exposure, but about translation? Most people don't fully understand themselves, not because they're shallow, but because introspection is hard. Emotions don't come with labels. Trauma disguises itself as habits. Fear dresses up as sarcasm or productivity or indifference. When someone reflects a pattern back to you, it can feel like they've stolen something from your mind. In reality, they've just held up a mirror you weren't expecting. And mirrors can be shocking. Think about how often you've had a friend say, "You always do this when you're stressed," and you immediately want to argue. Not because they're wrong, but because they might be right. Insight threatens the stories we tell ourselves, and psychologists, by reputation alone, represent insight. That's why people joke about not wanting to be analyzed. Jokes are safer than vulnerability. There's also an interesting control dynamic here. If you believe psychologists can read minds, then you don't have to risk opening up. You can sit back and say, "They already know." It removes responsibility, no need to find the words, no need to face the mess directly. It's passive understanding, outsourced. But real psychological insight doesn't work that way. It's collaborative. It's built slowly through language, trust, and curiosity. Nothing is pulled out of you. It's uncovered together. Here's the quiet reframe I want to leave you with. The people who believe psychologists can read minds are often highly self-aware, emotionally sensitive, and attuned to social cues. Their brains are already doing a lot of scanning. They're just turning that ability inward and assuming others can do it better. That's not weakness. That's perception without boundaries, yet. When you learn that understanding doesn't equal invasion, the fear softens. Being seen becomes a choice, not a threat. And psychology stops feeling like a spotlight and starts feeling like a language. A language for things you've always felt but never quite named. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "They can see right through me," pause for a second. Ask yourself what you're really afraid of losing. Control, privacy, or the safety of staying misunderstood just a little longer? And maybe ask something gentler too. What part of me wants to be understood, even if it's scary? If this topic made you think of yourself or someone you know, you're not alone. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that quiet tension around psychology or insight or being seen. And if you want to keep exploring why the mind does these beautifully strange things, you know where to find me.